Okay, I want to do a little correction video. I think I must have misspoken about one of the verses. Now, no one complained about it. I just happened to notice it after I'd done the video. It's the verse about Revelation 25, and this is in the 24 Elders video that has the really cool sentence at the bottom that's prophetic with the priestly order. But the verse was, this is the first resurrection. The rest of the dead did not come back to life until the 1,000 years had ended. Blessed and holy are those who share in the first resurrection. For them the second death holds no power, but they will be priests of God and of Christ and will reign with him 1,000 years. Now, I was reading it on a screen like this, so I didn't really have the context of the Bible hold on, I've got a different page pulled up here. I didn't really have the context of the Bible to look at, so I misspoke and said that first resurrection was the dead in Christ and the raptured bride of Christ. But that's clearly not the case, because here you will see that it says here in verse 4 of Revelation 20 here, then I saw thrones and the people sitting on them had been given the authority to judge. Remember, that is the elders, okay? And I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their testimony, and that is the fifth seal saints, okay? The ones that were that were martyred is the right word there, okay? And then they came to life, and they're going to reign with Christ for 1,000 years, because we all are, right? That is the first resurrection, okay? So those ones that show up and John is saying, where did all these people come from? And then one of the elders says, well, they came out of the tribulation and they've washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb, from every tribe and nation and tongue, that kind of thing. So that is the first resurrection. Now, before we knew this other information, I would have said of the tribulation. But since we know now that the time of the tribulation started when the October 6th, 7th date of the Julian calendar, which was 9/23/924 on 2025, right? That date was actually on the Julian calendar, okay, from the God's countdown clock. So what this really means is that this is the first resurrection after he started opening the seals. So when the events of the tribulation started to unfold, this would be the first group that would be resurrected during that time. And this is the only group, according to this verse right here, this is the only group that is resurrected. The rest of the dead did not come back to life until the 1,000 years had ended, okay? And they're coming up for judgment, okay? Because the rest of the dead would be who? It would be people that did not have their robes white, dirty brides that stayed dirty brides, okay? This group that comes up, they are redeemed, right? They've washed their robe in the blood of the Lamb. They got under the covering of the gift of the sacrifice, and their robes are not soiled to the point where they're going to be thrown into outer darkness or the lake of fire, okay? They get to come up and they get to rule and reign as well. Now, the other ones that are staying dirty brides, well, they're not being resurrected right now. Neither are any unbelievers, okay? They will have to be dealt with later, okay? Now, I'm not going to get into all of that right now because I want to make sure this is clear. All right, so then I'm just going to read what I wrote here just to make sure that I've covered everything and you're clear on this, okay? I think I was distracted and I misspoke about the first resurrection. The dead in Christ resurrection and the bride rapture are not at the same time as this first resurrection, which is basically before the sixth seal happens, okay? Because you're not appointed to wrath. That is the first resurrection of the tribulation, really after the seals start to open, okay? So I may need to go ahead and put that in there too, now that we have this new information. And that's after the bride or the elder population has been set, okay? And some people will mix this up and say, well, see, look, it says that's the first resurrection, so you guys aren't going up early. It's not a pre-trib rapture. But that is not true, okay? That's not the case, because what do we see? Well, we see that the elders And the ones who have the authority to judge, well, they're there, and then this thing happens, okay? So that's not true, all right? You see how that's not true? And so then we read the verse. I think we did all that. So the first resurrection would be the tribulation saints who had washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb. They've had to be wearing white, okay? They can't be dirty brides still and come up. They still have to be wearing white. Now, it could be also, though, that it's not the same standard as the bride was, okay? The bride's like, you got to be spotless, okay? But this group falls in sort of that category of, if they're not doing the sins that are listed in Ephesians 5, Galatians 5, 1 Corinthians chapter 6, Revelation 22:15, or anywhere else that he says, if you're doing these things, you will not inherit my kingdom. It could be that they can come in then, because it's a different group, right? They're not held to the same standards as the elders. Okay, so if they meet those requirements, then their robe would be white, okay? It's not spotless, perhaps. They can maybe have done something because it's not one of those detestable sin groups and still make it in, okay, if that makes sense. All right, but anybody else that's in those other categories, well, if they're dirty like that, where you're not going to inherit the kingdom, well, then they're not coming up. They're not being resurrected, okay? They'll have to wait till later, and then they will be judged, and that's when he will probably send all of those people to the outer darkness or the lake of fire, depending on where they go, okay? All right, so hopefully that clears that up, but the information, again, was still the same. Let me get right on it so you can see it. However, both groups would not need to be concerned with the second death, as they are both wearing white, okay? So whether it's the dead in Christ that were resurrected or this other group of the tribulation saints who washed their robes, okay? They're both wearing white now, and they're both not going to have to be concerned about the second death. Once you get up there in the white robes, you're good, okay? You're golden, all right? There's no going back from that. You don't have to be concerned about anything. You're in, okay? So the same info was the same, just different group that was being resurrected here in this first resurrection of the tribulation after the seals start to open. So now that we know more, we can say more, all right? So I hope that clears things up, and I love you guys.